In the shadowed corners of a family woven tight by duty and unspoken expectations, Mara carries the weight of it all on shoulders that ache from years of silent giving. She's the glue, the caretaker, pouring her energy into everyone else's storms, while her own skies darken unnoticed. Mornings like this one pull her deeper into the routine, where the air thickens with the scent of brewing resolve and hidden fractures. The kitchen hummed with the low grind of the coffee maker, steam curling like unspoken sighs into the morning light filtering through the apartment's half-drawn blinds. Mara stood at the counter, her movements precise yet frayed, as if her body were a well-oiled machine on the verge of sputter. She flipped open her planner, pen scratching quick notes. Nadia's call at 8:15. Remind her about the doctor's app. A beat, then, Issa needs ride to work. Pack his lunch. Her own entry? Blank. Fatigue clung to her like the damp towel slung over the chair, heavy from last night's laundry cycle she'd run alone. Mara, Dorogaya, could you grab the milk from the fridge? It's way in the back. Nadia's voice floated from the living room, laced with that familiar assumption of availability. Mara nodded to the empty air, reaching deep into the shelves, her arm straining as if pulling her own resolve along with it. The coffee maker beeped, and she poured the first mug. Black for Nadia, no sugar, handing it over with a soft, "Here, Mama." Nadia took it without looking up from her phone, murmuring thanks into the screen. Issa shuffled in next, hair tousled, scrolling his feed. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes flicking to Mara as she sliced bread for his toast, butter knife flashing under the pendant light. "Hey, you got that meeting today?" he asked, casual, not moving to help. Mara felt the pull, the invisible tether yanking her forward. "Yeah, after I drop you off. Don't forget your keys." Her voice stayed even, but inside, the fatigue twisted into something sharper, a tension coiling in her chest like a spring wound, too tight. She was the axis here, spinning everyone else's day into motion while her own blurred at the edges. Click. She set the kitchen timer for 10 minutes. Her new ritual, a desperate bid to carve space amid the chaos. Just for brewing, she told herself, watching the red digits tick down. But as Issa grabbed his mug and Nadia called for more cream, the timer mocked her, its insistent beep drowned out by the family's rhythm. Mara wiped her hands on her apron, glancing at her reflection in the toaster's chrome, faint lines etching deeper. Who would notice if she paused? Who would step in when the timer ran out? Her needs ticking away unseen. Issa lingered a second longer, his gaze brushing hers, observant, almost. But he turned away, grabbing his bag. The morning churned on, Mara's invisible labor fueling it all, the imbalance as steady as the coffee's drip. Later that evening, the kitchen light flickered softly over the worn laminate counter, casting long shadows across the faded family recipe book. Mara's fingers, calloused from years of chopping and stirring, traced the spine, its cover a mosaic of grease stains and frayed edges, a relic from her grandmother's hands. She flipped it open to the dog-eared page for borscht, the one with Cyrillic notes scrawled in pencil. Dobavit Lyubov, inaczej to. Add love, otherwise it's not right. Tradition demanded it, especially on nights like this, when the apartment hummed with the unspoken weight of routine. Nadia leaned against the fridge, her apron loosely tied, eyes distant as she stirred her tea. Mara, Dorogaya, remember Aunt Lena's call yesterday? She's still upset about the move. You should ring her tomorrow. Tell her it'll be okay. You always know what to say. It wasn't a question, just a gentle slide of expectation, like passing a hot dish without asking if her hands were full. Mara nodded, knife pausing mid-chop on the beets, the red juice staining her cutting board like blood from a fresh wound. Her shoulders ached, a deep fatigue settling in her bones from the morning's rush. Packing Issa's lunch, listening to Nadia's worries about the neighbor's cat, mediating a text spat between cousins. But she kept slicing, the rhythm steady, mechanical. Issa burst in from the living room, phone in hand, grinning like he'd won some invisible game. "Hey, sis, you making the magic soup again? Last time it was so good, I almost proposed to the bowl." He laughed, loud and careless, plopping onto a stool and scrolling through memes. "Seriously though, save me seconds. I'm starving after that gym sesh." His eyes flicked up briefly, missing the way Mara's jaw tightened, the subtle tremor in her grip on the knife. He didn't see the invisible threads pulling her taut, the recipes that bound her to the past, the requests that piled like unchecked bills. As the pot simmered, steam rising in lazy curls, Mara wiped her brow, the heat pressing in. Fatigue bloomed into something sharper, tension coiling in her chest, a quiet storm she swallowed down. The book lay open beside her, pages whispering of inherited duties. But who would close it? Who would say enough? She added the cabbage, stirring slowly, the question lingering unspoken in the air, like the scent of simmering beets. A few days later, the kitchen hummed with the low drone of the refrigerator, steam curling from a pot on the stove, where Mara stirred a pot of borscht, the family recipe her hands knew by rote. Her shoulders sagged, invisible weights pulling at the threads of her sweater. Issa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his eyes tracing the lines etched deeper around her mouth since last week. "You look tired, Mara," he said finally, voice soft, like he was testing the air. "I mean, really tired. Like, you've been carrying all this, holding the water for everyone, you know, pouring it out, keeping us from drowning. I see it now. You're amazing at it." She paused, spoon hovering mid-stir, a flicker of warmth blooming in her chest. Recognition, at last, like sunlight piercing fog. Her brother, the one who always slipped away from the heavy talks, admitting he saw. But the words landed light, a feather on her skin, brushing past without lifting the load. Amazing. It echoed the empty praises she'd heard before, compliments that polished the surface but left the cracks unseen. She set the spoon down, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter where, tucked beneath a stack of mail, lay the unsent letter, pages of her unspoken aches, folded tight, waiting for a courage she couldn't muster. "Amazing," she echoed, a small laugh escaping, bitter as the beets. "Thanks, Issa. That's something." The warmth curdled, sharpening into a sting. He saw, but what then? No offer to take the pot, no question about her own parched throat. Just words, floating free, leaving her to hold it all still. He shifted, uncomfortable, rubbing his neck. "I didn't know how to help before. But yeah, you're the strong one." His gaze dropped, avoiding hers, the silence stretching like a shadow. Mara's hand trembled as she reached for the letter's corner, tracing its edge without pulling it free. Could she let this glimpse of seeing pull her in, only to fade back into the blur? The borscht bubbled on, unattended, the steam veiling her face. That afternoon, the laptop screen flickered in the dim living room of their urban apartment, casting a soft blue glow over the kitchen table, cluttered with half-empty mugs, in the faded family recipe book. Mara sat at the center, her shoulders hunched like a question mark, fingers tracing the edge of an unsent letter tucked in her notebook. Words she'd scribbled in the night, too raw to mail, too heavy to voice. Isa slouched beside her, scrolling his phone absent-mindedly, while Nadia perched on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, her face a mask of polite attentiveness. The Zoom call connected with a chime, and Dr. Leon Cortez appeared, her warm smile filling the frame like sunlight breaking through fog. "Good afternoon, everyone," Dr. Cortez said, her voice steady and inviting, laced with the gentle cadence of someone who had unraveled countless silences. "We've talked about the exhaustion you're carrying, Mara. Today, let's name it. What you're describing. The planning, the listening, the holding space for everyone's feelings while yours fade into the background. That's emotional labor." She could feel the shape of it now, the labor she'd poured into late-night talks with Isa about his dreams, or Nadia's quiet sighs over old wounds. "I can ask," she thought, the unsent letter suddenly lighter in her mind, its words no longer trapped. Isa finally glanced up, his brow furrowing, as if hearing his own dismissals echoed back. Nadia shifted, her crossed arms loosening just a fraction, a flicker of realization in her eyes. They weren't just witnesses, they were part of this. Dr. Cortez paused, her tone warm as fresh bread. "Naming it is the first step, but sharing it? That's the dialogue ahead. What do you think? Can we claim this responsibility as a family?" The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the screen held their reflections. Mara held the letter closer, wondering if words, once spoken, could finally bridge the silence. The next morning, the kitchen hummed with the faint clatter of dishes, steam rising from the teapot like unspoken sighs. Mara stood at the counter, her fingers steady as she twisted the dial on the old kitchen timer, a relic from their grandmother's era, its plastic face yellowed with time. Click, the soft tick began, marking seconds like a heartbeat she could finally claim. "Family," she said, voice firm but laced with the warmth of their shared Russian roots. "Сегодня я отдыхаю." No more rain check calls, no smoothing over the rough edges for anyone today. The timer's set for 2 hours. Just for me. Isa looked up from his phone, brow furrowed in mild confusion, fork pausing mid-air over his half-eaten breakfast. Nadia, wiping her hands on a dish towel, offered a neutral nod, her smile polite as always. "Okay, Mara, whatever you need." The words hung easy, like the morning light filtering through the window blinds. No pushback, just the routine flow of their urban apartment life, where needs bent without breaking the surface. But as the minutes ticked, the air thickened. Isa's screen buzzed. A text from a friend venting about work drama, and he glanced at Mara instinctively, waiting for her to lean in, to absorb it with that quiet empathy she always provided. She didn't. Instead, she poured herself tea, sinking into a chair with a book, her posture a deliberate wall. Nadia cleared her throat, stacking plates with deliberate clinks. "You know, your aunt called earlier. She's spiraling again about the move." The statement landed like a probe, eyes flicking to Mara for the usual rescue. Isa shifted, his casual slouch tightening. "Yeah, and I was thinking about that thing with Dad's old letters. You always know what to say." Mara's resolve flickered, a shadow of fear crossing her face. The old lie whispering that without her, the threads would unravel. But she held, the timer's relentless tick echoing her pulse. Tension coiled in the silence, their expectations pressing like invisible hands. Would the vacuum pull her back in, or could this boundary hold against the tide of habit? In the quiet aftermath of that morning, Mara slumped at the kitchen table, the faded recipe book splayed open like an old wound. The apartment hummed with distant city noise, but inside, silence pressed heavier than the steam from her untouched tea. Her fingers traced the spine of the book, inherited from Babushka, and suddenly, the room blurred. Flash, a cramped kitchen in their old house, sunlight slanting through yellowed curtains. Little Mara, 8 years old, wiping tears from her cheeks after a playground scrape. Babushka loomed over the stove, stirring borscht with brisk authority. Prosto delay, detka, she commanded, voice like gravel underfoot. Just do it. No time for tears. Family needs feeding, needs holding together. Mara's small hands trembled as she reached for the potatoes, the weight of unpeeled expectations settling in her chest. Babushka's eyes, sharp as knives, softened only in the doing, never in the feeling. Back in the now, Mara's breath hitched, anxiety coiling tight in her ribs. Why did that memory surge now, like a tide pulling her under? She glanced at the drawer beside her, the one she never opened in front of Isa or Nadia. Heart pounding, she pulled it out. There it was, the unsent letter, folded crisp from years of hiding, scribbled in her looping script from months ago. I'm so tired. The caring is eating me alive. But if I stop, who will? Words she'd written in a fever of exhaustion, then sealed away. The paper felt alive in her hands, whispering accusations. Submission or survival? Babushka's rule echoed. Just do it. Swallow the ache. Another flash. Teenage Mara, homework scattered, mediating Isa's tantrum while Nadia nursed a migraine on the couch. Babushka's voice from the hallway. Prosto delay. Women carry, men follow. It's how we endure. Mara had nodded then, stuffing her own homework aside. The rift widening. Daughter to caretaker, invisible thread pulling tighter. The family leaned on her like that old oak in the yard, roots unseen but vital, cracking under frost. Mara's pulse raced, anxiety spiking as the letter crinkled under her grip. But then, a shift. The words on the page sharpened. No longer a secret shame, but a mirror. This wasn't just hers. Babushka's legacy, Nadia's blind echo, the why behind every expectant glance from her family. They waited because that's what was taught. One woman shoulders the invisible load, generation after generation. Realization bloomed, warm and unsteady, cutting through the fog. She could name it now, the fatigue roaring louder than silence ever could. But could she voice it without the sting of guilt, without Babushka's ghost judging from the grave? The letter lay open, unanswered, the question hanging in the steam-scented air. That evening, as the boundaries' tension lingered, the kitchen hung heavy with the scent of cooling chamomile tea, steam curling like unspoken regrets from mugs left untouched on the scarred wooden table. Mara stood by the sink, her hands gripping the edge, knuckles white against the porcelain. She'd done it, finally voiced the boundary after the family dinner's chaos. I can't mediate every argument tonight. I need space to breathe. Her voice had cracked, but it was out, a small rebellion against the invisible chains of always smoothing edges, always pouring herself into their fractures. At first, silence. Not the warm, familial hush of shared stories, but a void that pressed in, amplifying the tick of the kitchen timer she'd set earlier as her fragile anchor. Nadia, her mother, sat rigid at the table, her faded recipe book clutched like a shield, pages yellowed with generations of silent sacrifices. Isa slouched against the counter, scrolling his phone with feigned indifference, but his eyes flicked up, sharp and wounded. You've been pulling away, Mara, Nadia said at last, her voice low, laced with accusation. The words landed like stones in still water. Ever since that therapy nonsense, we're family, Russian through and through. Semyonov Krug. Remember? But now you're acting like we're the burden. Isa nodded, not looking up. Yeah, sis. It's like you're building a wall. What happened to us talking it out? You're just distant. The silence deepened, a suffocating blanket draping the room. No clatter of dishes, no laughter over old anecdotes, just the hum of the fridge and Mara's pulse thundering in her ears. Determination had carried her here, fueled by Dr. Cortez's words on emotional labor, the weight she'd named for the first time. But now, isolation clawed at her resolve. Was this the fracture she'd feared? Their eyes on her, not with gratitude, but blame, made her chest tighten. Had she misread it all? If she folded now, apologized, and dove back into the fray, would the peace return? Or was this the real cost? Watching the family she'd poured her soul into turn cold. Mara swallowed, her reflection fractured in the window above the sink. The timer buzzed faintly, forgotten, its boundaries as tentative as her own. Doubt seeped in, whispering that maybe she was the one breaking them after all. While Mara retreated, Isa slumped at the kitchen table, the faded recipe book splayed open like an accusation, its pages whispering of meals Mara had always prepared without fanfare. The apartment hummed with absence. Nadia outrunning errands. Mara retreated to her room after that damn timer had ticked down her 2-hour boundary, leaving a vacuum that sucked the air from the room. Isa's fingers drummed the wood, erratic, as guilt coiled in his chest like smoke from a forgotten stove. He'd never seen it. All those mornings, she'd smoothed his frayed nerves before work, absorbed Nadia's quiet sighs over tea, stitched the family's fraying edges with her endless patience. Taiv segda takoi silani, she'd say to him in that soft Russian lilt, meaning you're always so strong. But it was her strength holding them up, and he'd nodded, oblivious, letting her carry the weight. Now, alone, the guilt sharpened. He glanced up, catching his reflection in the kitchen mirror above the sink. Hollow-eyed, jaw tight, the same face that had dismissed her exhaustion as just being you. The glass stared back, unblinking, forcing him to confront the boy who'd leaned on her without a thought. His throat tightened. Heat pricked his eyes. How many times had he breezed past her fatigue, assuming she'd always be there, the invisible glue? Isa pulled a notepad from the drawer, pen trembling as he scrawled, Mara, I didn't see it. All this time, you've been... The words blurred, but they anchored him, pulling the guilt toward something solid. Acknowledgement. He owed her that, owed himself the truth. He'd been blind, selfish, and now the emptiness at the table screamed it. He paused, pen hovering, heart pounding. Could he really step up, offer the support she'd given him? The mirror held his gaze, waiting. The tension built to a breaking point that night at the kitchen table gleamed under the dim pendant light, steam rising from bowls of borscht like unspoken sighs. Mara's hands trembled as she pushed her spoon aside, the faded family recipe book wedged between salt shaker and bread loaf, a silent heirloom of inherited burdens. Isa slouched across from her, picking at his plate, while Nadia buttered a slice with mechanical precision, the air thick with the weight of routine politeness. I can't do this anymore, Mara said, her voice cracking like thin ice. She pulled the envelope from her sweater pocket, the unsent letter, creased from nights of rewriting her heart. Anxiety coiled in her chest, a vice tightening as eyes turned to her. What if this shattered everything? The family she'd stitched together with invisible threads? Nadia's fork paused mid-air. Doragaya, what's wrong? Eat. You look pale. Mara unfolded the pages, words spilling out in a rush. I wrote this to myself, mostly, but it's for us. I've been carrying everyone's storms. Yours, Issa's, the calls at midnight, the apologies no one asks for. Emotional labor, Dr. Cortez called it. The unseen work that keeps us afloat. Her pulse raced, fear of isolation clawing up her throat. I'm terrified. If I stop, will you all drift away? Will I lose this? She gestured at the table, the warmth of piroshki cooling between them. Issa shifted, his usual smirk fading. Mara, I see it now. You're exhausted. I've been blind, taking it for granted. But what do you want from us? The room held its breath, tension humming like a live wire. External, the family's fragile harmony teetering. Internal, Mara's guilt warring with resolve. She leaned forward, eyes glistening. A plan, shared. Mondays, Issa checks in with Nadia. No more me mediating. Wednesdays, we talk needs, out loud. No silence about what we carry. And transparency. Like journalists, full honesty. No more hiding the toll. Nadia's face softened, a flicker of recognition breaking through her defenses. Yaponi Mayu, I didn't see how much you've shouldered, like I did for my mother. We'll try, together. Relief washed over Mara, anxiety ebbing into a tentative liberation, her shoulders dropping as if a knot had unraveled. Isa nodded slowly, reaching for the bread. A small gesture, but real. The letter lay open on the table, no longer unsent, its words bridging the gap. Could her voice rewrite their rhythm without tearing the seams? The question lingered in the steam, unanswered, as forks resumed their quiet dance. In the days that followed, the camera lingers on the warm glow of the kitchen table, where steam rises from cooling mugs of tea. Dr. Leon Cortez's face fills the laptop screen in a zoom frame. Her voice, steady and inviting, like a hand extended across the divide. Emotional labor isn't just felt, it's seen when we choose to look, she says, her eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. Mara, Issa, Nadia, you've named it today. Now, make it visible through small rituals. Start with one. Acknowledge the unseen work aloud, every evening. Share the load. Who cooks? Who listens? Who checks in? Viewers at home, try this. Tonight, thank someone for their quiet effort. It's a step toward equity in care. Mara sits at the table's head, her fingers tracing the faded spine of the family recipe book. Resolve hardening her jaw. She's tired of the invisible orbit, the way her days dissolved into others' needs. But doubt flickers. Will this stick, or will she slip back into the caretaker's shadow? Okay, she says, voice firm, pulling the kitchen timer from the drawer. Its plastic ticks softly as she twists the dial to 15 minutes. For check-ins, no more endless talks. We time it, share turns. Issa nods, leaning forward, his usual dismissiveness cracked. I'll start. Thanks for always picking up my mess, Mara. I see it now. He grabs a notepad, scribbling a quick roster. Him on laundry, Nadia on calls home. Nadia, her mother's hands clasped tight, exhales. Dorogoy, my dear. She murmurs in Russian, eyes softening on Mara. You've carried us too long. I'll handle the stories from Aunt Lena. No more dumping on you. The air hums with motion. Issa rises to clear plates. Nadia pours fresh tea. And Mara sets the timer down with a decisive clink, its face glowing like a promise. Determination pulses in her chest, pushing against the fear of fracture. But as their voices overlap in tentative plans, Mondays for me, I'll listen more. A quiet hope blooms, fragile yet insistent. Dr. Cortez smiles on screen. That's it. Action honors the labor. Build from here. The timer beeps softly, marking the end of the first round. But the family's rhythm feels just beginning. Will they hold it, this shared pulse, or let it fade? The question hangs, unanswered, as laughter, real, unforced, ripples through the room.